So I just finished up some work on this extremely rare, one of a kind as far as I know. I bet you there's probably a handful of these. But you know, it's hard to know. There isn't good documentation on this era of the Regal company, which is who made this guitar, even though it says Wabash up here on the headstock. It seems like Regal made all of the Wabash guitars after World War II. And I've found guitars not exactly like this, but have all of these elements that have all been made by Regal. But this is such a strange and unique example for a number of reasons. Number one, the most glaring one, is this crazy bridge situation that's happening down here, where usually most guitars have one of two situations, right? You have a glued on sort of bridge like that, where the strings terminate in the middle of the top or somewhere near the middle of the top and are anchored there. Or you have a bridge and a tailpiece kind of situation here, where you have an anchor usually attached. It's a modular piece, right, that could come and go, and then a floating bridge that can move around as mobile. This has a floating bridge that can move around as mobile, but this has all the strings anchored the way you would have a glued-on bridge, but way back here. It's weird. It's super weird. But I've seen a couple of examples, not just made by Regal, but this idea goes back. I've seen old ouds that have this sort of situation made like 150 years ago. And I'm sure there are many examples predate that. I think there are like French guitars that have a similar kind of idea, where they're very elaborate mustachios down here and a sort of separate bridge situation that's floating or not float, you know. Look, people have tried most things you can do with a guitar. The other thing that's really odd about this guitar is, rather than this being a bent cutaway, this is actually, if you take a little look inside, this cutaway is a sort of solid block that's around 1/4 of an inch thick, I'm guessing, sort of cut out, and then the side joins back up with it right here at the cutaway, so they didn't have to bend this extreme cutaway, which really seems like, I know Regal had a sort of a custom shop or a specialties sort of section of what they made, because it seems like they made several one-off instruments, whether it's by special request or whatever. And this seems like one of those, and this would seem like the sort of thing where they take a normal body and be like, if we cut this piece, we can sort of, and cut the way our sides are bent, we can make a cutaway guitar without designing it whole cloth, you know? 3-piece neck, which is interesting. These odd, chevron sort of inlays here, which you see on other Regal guitars. Big frets. And what else? It has a stamp, some numbers stamped in it, 9-51, which could easily mean, and this would make sense with other examples that I've seen. This was made August of 1951. I'd say that's probably a rough guesstimate of around where it would be made anyway, even if you hadn't seen that, because I've seen examples in the late 40s and early 50s of Regal building in this style. And it has a really, really odd voice, really strange, unique. It's not a flat top, it's not an arch top, it's somewhere in between. And it has this very sizzly, and by that I mean you get a lot of that part of the, tone wave, the frequency wave of what comes out of it has a lot of that kind of hi-fi sound that I associate with like a lore style arch top or an Epiphone. And it's particularly good up in that sort of, has a lot of air in that chord chunky. of projection. It's a small bodied guitar. Very, very light though. Extremely lightly built guitar. And what I've had to do with it is its tuner buttons had completely dissolved, so I melted new tuner buttons on there. Easy peasy. And it's had some work. There are some, you know, roughly repaired cracks on the back, but they're good. And so I didn't go messing around with that. But the way the bracing works on this guitar is there's a brace like ladders, not very tall ladders, just a couple little ladders, boom here, one here, and then a big spruce bridge plate that terminates about three pins down. And so these 3 pins, and really these 4 pins, were cutting directly into the top. And just more evidence that somebody sort of slapped this thing together, probably on spec. This was not like a very designed guitar. Maybe they're just, you know, there's a history of Gibson doing floor sweeping models where they would take a bunch of parts, like a secretary would grab a bunch of spare parts and just plop them on a workman's bench, and they'd have to make something out of it. I don't know, that might be apocryphal. It sounds sort of dumb. But this is a weird one, regardless. Anyway, I made the decision. I thought about this quite a bit because it was not an easy proposition what to do with it. Because also it was causing this lump at the end of this, call it a bridge or a tailpiece, whatever it is. This piece of wood here, the end of it was lifting up because there's nothing supporting it on the other side. Like usually you have a bridge plate under a bridge, and that helps the bridge not shear, right? Because it's not just one. You got a little sandwich of strength there. This had no sandwich of strength, and so I was like, well, maybe I could put little individual patches under each string and sort of hike them up and build that area up a little bit. And less and less made sense to do that. More and more made sense to just expand the patch of the bridge plate, which is what I ended up doing. And I did it within as much tolerable reason as I could. I took a thin piece of very light maple and sort of wedged it so it would be in the profile this little bit, and butted it up against the existing bridge plate to give a firm anchor for the bottom strings. And then I patched in another piece of, it was an extra thin, much thinner than the plate down here, because this was just to go over the piece of spruce. I had a little piece of oak that I had left over from building this guitar. And it was extra thin, so it was sort of the perfect size. And I put that as a top to the bridge plate that's existent in a little triangular piece, just enough to cover so these ball ends aren't cutting in anymore to that bridge plate, and also have enough surround, not a ton, but enough surround that it's not going to distort and want to, you know, cracker around too much. And that's what I did. And I re-glued this bottom part of the bridge that was lifting up, and it's all strung up now. It's unchanged, because I just played it a couple days ago. It sounds just as full and bassy, so I'm very confident that this was the right thing to do, because it's going to ensure the longevity of this instrument. Of course, I do all my repairs with hot hide glue, so everything could be reversed. You know, nothing was lapped or crazy. If someone wanted to, I don't know. Look, people get wild with what they want to do with guitars, but I've at least ensured this one is going to have a bit of a longer life and still retain what I think is really special and beautiful about it. So that's my little long-winded story about this thing. Really cool and unique though. I thought it was worth making a video about because I bet you haven't seen one like this. Or if you have, if someone has one like this, please contact me because I'd love to see it. I've seen a couple online, not cutaway though. I've seen more in a typical parlor body shape. And same idea, but different, not these pieces of wood, for sure. These shapes, or this shape in particular, seems unique to this instrument. I don't know. That's enough yammering. Thanks!